Hello, and welcome back to the second series, first episode of In the Hot Seat with Emily DeAyala and Dr. Viviana Coles. I am Emily, and this is Dr. Coles, and we are so excited that you're joining us back today. So just to recap, we spent the first episode introducing ourselves, so in case you missed that and you're curious about our background, definitely go back and take a look. And then we did an entire 4-part series on sexual desire, because that is a complex issue.
Very, very complex, very common.
Yeah, definitely.
Something that we see very often.
So definitely go back and check those out if you missed them. And then at the end of each episode, we are giving you guys a challenge, which we're having a lot of fun with.
Hot Seat Challenge.
Exactly.
Hashtag HOTSEAT. Go back, you and your partner can go ahead and do those challenges. It's a lot of fun.
It's fun, and the idea is just to get you thinking a little outside the box and applying some of the principles that we talk about in these series to your own life. So in this next series, we are going to explore different relationship dynamics because, as we've said a million times by now, we cannot separate. Sex is not in like a separate category.
It's not this own little box that fits nicely in the corner.
Sometimes couples come in and it is a pure sexual issue and it's a simple case, but a lot of times it's a bit more complex. So we're going to spend this series talking about the different relationship dynamics that can influence your sexuality and your desire for sex.
Yeah, and how it plays out in your relationship.
Yes.
So today's topic mainly will be about power and control and how it influences the way that you feel about your partner and their own sexuality, the way that you feel about your own individual sexuality, and how it often plays a negative role in your own sex life.
Definitely.
So when we talk about power, what do we mean? We're talking about typically a trait that can pop in and out of a personality, or that is more of a stagnant, stable part of a personality, which means that you're trying to jockey for a position of power in your relationship. Now, a lot of people will say, well, we don't have that issue. But they do sexually.
Yes, exactly.
So it may not play out on a daily basis, but when it comes to sex, there's this constant trying to figure out who's going to initiate, whose drive is going to drive the sexual relationship.
Right.
And that can end up looking pretty ugly for people who don't have this issue outside of the bedroom, because then they think, will we ever get past this?
Right.
Is this ever going to be something that we're able to figure out and negotiate? And one of the things that coming to a sex therapist or a relationship therapist can do is help you to negotiate healthier ways of expressing and sharing your power in a relationship, especially sexually.
Because remember, systems in a relationship is a system of parts. Like, she and I have a professional relationship. We are a system of parts working together right now. And the same applies in romantic relationships. Systems like to remain in balance or homeostasis. So what can happen sometimes is if one person in the relationship tends to be more dominant, controlling, or they crave that sense of power a little bit because the system wants to remain in homeostasis, the other person can kind of shut down. And this is not a conscious or back off. Right. Exactly. And this is not a conscious or manipulative or intentional effort to withhold, but just like people who have eating disorders, usually an eating disorder is a symptom of something dysfunctional happening in a family system. So that person who has an eating disorder is trying to feel control over something. And that happens very subconsciously. And the same can happen for sex. So the person who shuts down sexually, sometimes it can be about, okay, this is something I have control over.
Right. And what we tend to hear, for the untrained ear, but for us, when we hear things like, I just don't feel like it. Or I used to feel like it, and now I don't. Or I've never had this problem with anyone else. And that kind of perks our ears up, because then we're thinking, there's something going on here that we need to explore further to figure out why this person doesn't want this, and why all of a sudden these feelings that were present and had been present for a long time are no longer there. And sometimes it can play out like, very frankly, well,
it's obvious.
You don't make me feel wanted. You don't make me feel like I have any voice in this relationship. And I know you want sex with me, so I'm going to not give that to you because that makes me feel more in balance. That makes me feel more like I have a say. And that's my way of voicing
Exerting
that concern
control,
and
kind of owning
exerting the
something.
control. Other times it can look more like control.
Yes. Yeah.
It can be more about a punishment.
Right.
It can be more about, sorry. That's okay.
It's okay.
It can be about punishment. It can be about trying to feel like you're worth more than just your sexual body.
Right.
You know, a lot of women that come in to see me are concerned that, you know, why does my partner want me all the time? And sometimes I feel objectified by
Exactly.
that. And that can feel really icky, especially if it doesn't match up with your expectations of what a healthy sexual and romantic relationship can look like.
Right.
So we can help navigate that with both parties to help them to understand that that control doesn't necessarily have to play out in a sexual way. It can be something that you communicate and share in different ways.
Because at the end of the day, I think that being in a relationship with another person should enhance who you are. It shouldn't necessarily fill a void, and it certainly shouldn't make you feel small. When I hear that, that's a big red flag that, you know, of course, there's no wonder that there are sexual issues or relationship
In
dynamics
this
playing out.
relationship, I'm feeling like all I'm good for is a sexual partner.
Yeah. And I
and
think
that's when he's nice to me, or that's
Right.
when she pays attention to me.
It's just if she
those
wants
are
sex.
little red flags that come up that we hear.
And I think that this, you know, issue of control can be more overt, like, you know, I never can pick what restaurant we go to. That's an obvious sign of maybe a controlling partner. But sometimes it can happen in a very subtle and covert way, and that's when it's harder to identify. And a lot of times, at least for me anyway, it's not something that I really see until I've worked with couples for a couple of sessions. And that's also why I like to get both people in the room, because you start to see the dynamic play out, and then you can identify it and work around it.
Yeah, when couples are feeling pretty comfortable and we've created that relationship in therapy, you'll get to see some of the dynamics that they're talking about that happen at home play out in the room. And it's really interesting because, you know, we can choose when to bring that up, but most of the time it's going to be fairly direct and, hey, I just noticed that. Is that something that happens often? And when we are working with couples and we're really clicking, that happens really often because they're showing us their true selves, and that is so helpful when it comes to the therapeutic process.
So if you're in a relationship where you feel like there's a control dynamic issue, definitely call a therapist, because that can, you know, it's something that's totally workable.
And it can spiral out of control if you don't.
Exactly. So we have a challenge for you guys today. Do you want to tell them?
Today's hashtag hot seat challenge is going to be to fill in the blank. I feel most empowered in my relationship when ... That's I feel most empowered in my relationship when ...
This one
Fill
should
it in.
really get the wheels spinning.
I
I'm
think
excited
so.
for these
I want to hear
results.
both men and women.
Yeah.
I want to hear from everyone about when you feel most empowered. Keep it in the comments, and we'll go ahead and share those in future episodes. Thanks again.